Welcome to another podcast episode. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome there as well. Today we have a good podcast. It's one of our financial mindset podcasts. I did the first one a few weeks ago. We talked about consumption versus savings. And this one, if you recall from that podcast, that actually stemmed from another podcast that we did with Kyle Freeman, where we were going through his whole process that he went through from the time he graduated to where he's at today. And we talked about some of the mental aspects of things, and I touched on some subjects there. And that really led to that savings versus consumption podcast. Now, the second one is something that I also touched on in that original podcast with Kyle, and that was mindset of financial discipline. And how do you get that financial discipline? And a lot of us already have discipline, right? We've just never been applying it to money. Others of us have zero financial discipline. So it's like, where do you get started? And on that episode, I had touched on one little tiny trick that I do. And I didn't go into detail in it. And this one I'm going to go into detail, right? So that trick, that mindset trick that I did, it actually stemmed, I'll give you some background on this. Back when I was playing sports and an athlete and all that stuff, right? You know, I got done playing, and it's like, how do you stay motivated to do this? Or even when you're like in sports and you're in the off season and you have some time off, how do you motivate yourself to get back into the gym and work out, right? Again, like I said, when you're done playing, it's like, well, why do I need to work out, right? And so you might take a week off, a month off, whatever it is, and all of a sudden it's like you're pulling yourself back into the gym. And I used to tell my wife all the time, it's like, and just friends, get yourself to the gym, all right? Like 2 or 3 weeks in a row. Just go. You don't even have to necessarily work out that hard. Just go and stretch if you want to. Just get there. And just by doing that, after like the second or third week, eventually you're gonna be like, I didn't go to the gym today. Something's wrong. I need to go. And that's how you start training your mind to do discipline stuff. So how did I take that lesson and then apply it to money? Well, I started saying things like, okay, well, what if you give up stuff, right? And everybody says that. Oh, give up this, give up eating out, give up this, give up that, right? Save money. It's like, okay, well, how do you do that? I started doing this thing of 40 days, meaning I just flat out gave up stuff for 40 days. Just done. Like, I'm not touching this. It could be anything. It doesn't matter. It could be financial. It could be health-wise, whatever it is. Now, I'm going to talk about finances in this podcast. But literally, for 40 days, just cat it out. I'm going to give you some examples of that. And I'm going to use examples of that I actually did and actually what it means to you monetarily, right? But also, the big thing about this is, of course, a FitBucks, we're a financial technology company, financial services. So that's what we apply this stuff to. The cool thing about this is you can do it with anything, right? Like just anything to make your life better. It just makes you realize a lot of times, like, I don't need XYZ to be happy. That is the consumption mentality, right? That is what we had talked about last week. Let it be this, let it be that, let it, these different things that we do. You don't need this. So this that we're going to talk about today can be applied to anything. But I'm going to give you the money examples. And like I said, I'm going to do examples of what I actually went through. So, for example, I did this one actually inadvertently. Back, for those of you guys have heard me say this in the past, those of you that are new to the podcast, I had a background in sports, right? So, like, my first job out of college was at the Dodgers, like, sports. So I grew up around sports, football, baseball, ice hockey, all these different things, right? And there was a point, and this is another podcast for like human capital development podcast that we might talk about maybe in the next mindset one podcast. But I started saying, I want to learn more. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I started slowly not watching sports anymore. And it came to a point where anytime I watched TV or a movie, I was like, I'm wasting my time. So what I actually did was I said, I'm just going to stop watching TV. I don't need TV. I don't need movies. Like, who cares? It just completely stopped because I was like, I'd rather be doing something else with my time. Now, how does it apply to this podcast? This is extremely hard. 40 days, right? 40 days, no TV. Just don't even turn it on. Get rid of it, right? A lot of you that are listening to this are like, well, I need my, to watch sports and blah, 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 blah. The thing is, like, one of the big things about the whole COVID crisis was that, to me, I've seen a lot of people be like, wow, I thought I couldn't live with sports, but apparently I could because it hasn't been on, and I'm perfectly okay, right? But that's one of the things you can do. And that's just one that I did, was TV. Now, think about this, okay? Most people, I would say, spend about $160, right around there, on TV. And you're like, well, $160? When you think about it, it's like, look at some of these packages, like Dish and all these different cable packages. They're expensive. They're like triple digits a month, if not $60, $80 a month. But then you got to buy like the sports package. Then you got to buy Netflix. And then you got to buy this. It gets up there. So let's just look at this one example, okay? $160 a month. Let's just say you got rid of that, okay? $160 a month. Instead of putting that towards TV and watching TV, that you turn around and you actually invest in that every week for 30 years, and you got a 5% return. I have it written down right here. In 30 years, it would be worth $133,000. Think about that. $133,000 just by giving up TV. Okay, now people say, "Oh, well, you gave up TV?" But I still have a TV. I just don't have any services. If I really, really want to watch something, I can stream it through the internet, which is very seldom. Maybe like the Super Bowl. I have an antenna that I can watch the Super Bowl if I really want to, or the World Series if I really want to. But these things where it's like you're binge watching shows and you're getting this, you'll learn. And this is one of the big things about this whole 40 days thing. When you get through the 40 days, oftentimes you're like, people are like, oh, I made it through, and then I can start doing it again. What you're gonna realize is you hit that 40th day, and you're like, I really actually don't need this. And most of the time, you never go back to doing it. I'm going to give you 2 examples of that right now. What besides TV that I was like, I'm just going to do this for health-wise. But then I realized I was like, I don't even need this stuff. Why am I going to go back to it, right? But that's just with TV. And I guarantee you that if you do that for 40 days where you watch 0 TV, that when you come out of those 40 days, you're probably going to be like, I don't need these different services. I don't need them. They're gone. And again, $160 on average. If you invest that instead over 30 years, that's $133,000, okay? So like I said, the next one was really difficult for me. My thing was caffeine, right? Not so much coffee. Most people are coffee drinkers. I hate coffee. I hate the taste of it. So I didn't drink that much coffee. But mine was like Rockstars and Red Bulls. It wasn't not uncommon that I was drinking 3 or 4 of those things a day. At least. And I was like, this can't be good health-wise. So I didn't do this financially. I did this because I was just like, I just can't be drinking this much caffeine. So let's look at this monetarily wise, because I gave it up for 40 days. And let's look at what happened from a monetary standpoint. Let's just say that's $5 a day. Okay? Which like I said, I was actually doing like 4 or 5 of Rockstars a day. So that's actually like $10 to $12 a day. But let's just say you're doing 2, a cup of coffee, Rockstar, whatever it is, and you're spending $5 a day. You work 240 days out of the year. Okay, let's just say that. Instead of those $5, that's $1,200 a year going to caffeine products. $1,200. Okay, so if you make $70,000 a year, think about that. It's a lot of money. Okay, $1,200 out of $70,000. You're upwards of 1 to 2% of your gross income just going to caffeine. It's like, oh, that's a lot. If you took that $5 or $1,200 a year and then reinvested it for 30 years at 5%, it's $79,000. Okay, think about that. Now with me, I cut the caffeine out because I was just like, I don't need the stimulant anymore. I'm good. I'll between sleep and this and that, I can replace this. Eating habits, whatever it is. I came out of those 40 days. I haven't drank caffeine since then, and I have 1,000 times more energy than I had when I drank caffeine. Not only that, but I'm saving a ton of money, right? Because I'm not drinking caffeine anymore. Okay, another one that was really hard, and this one I kind of did over time. I'll give you like a progression. Is alcohol, right? It, like, back probably 8 years ago, I say this was a progression because, like, 8 years ago, I found out I had, all of a sudden, just randomly, an allergy to beer. So I can't even drink beer. So it's like, that's off the table, right? So it's like wine and hard alcohol, right? So I kept drinking all this type of stuff, whatever it was. And I kept getting these allergic reactions. Not allergic, but reactions, but like just small swelling. It wasn't as bad with beer as it was with or it wasn't as bad with hard alcohol or wine as it was with beer. I'd get a little tiny reaction, but eventually I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to stop drinking this because, I just don't want to have this reaction anymore. And I'll see what happens for 40 days. And last year, say around like before August, probably May of last year, 2019, I did this 40 days, just no alcohol. I haven't drank since. I literally have not drank since that time period. I don't miss it at all. Like, people are like, oh, I need to drink to relax. No, I'll find other ways to relax, right? Like, I don't miss it. So again, that's just one of those things. That's not even $5. That's more. But think about how much money you spend just on your life already with alcohol. That if you all of a sudden you cut that out and then reinvested it, how much more money you would have and how much more healthy you would be. Okay? Now, sorry, I have some other notes written down. So here's another one that I did. And actually, I just did this one recently. Dessert, right? So like I have a 3-year-old, okay? And I was like, she's not getting any sweets or anything. Of course, grandma had to ruin that. So as soon as she found out what dessert was, it's like, she will not go to sleep without dessert. Like, she will just sit there and literally keep herself awake all night until she has dessert. And so naturally, it's like, well, if she has to have dessert, I have to have dessert. And just randomly, I was like, you know what? I went 30-something years of my life without eating all this crap. Why am I eating it now? So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to stop eating it. So let's just say dessert. That's like another $5 a day between ice cream and popsicles and all this other shit. So let's just say that's $5 a day. We already did the math about caffeine. That's another $79,000. That if you took that money and invested it instead over 30 years, it would be $79,000. So let's just look at this. These are 3 things that I've done personally. Okay, TV gone. That's so reinvesting that money with over 30 years, $133,000. Caffeine gone, $79,000 during that same time period. Okay, dessert gone, another $79,000. Just those 3 things, $291,000. That is, if I took that money and instead of paying that monthly, I took that money and invested it instead and earned a 5% return. Let's just say you go in the stock market or something like that, right? Over 30 years, $291,000. $291,000. That's 40 days. What I just showed you was 40, 80, 120. There's 360 days a year. So if you just did this for 1 year, and then after that 1 year, everything that you gave up, you continue to give up, which, like I said, some of the stuff you're going to go back to doing, that's fine, or do it at a little lower level. But that's $291,000 for 1/3 of a year. You multiply that by 3, that's almost $1 million just of doing sacrifices of 40 days. Because like I said, most of you are going to do this and either do it at an extremely reduced level or just completely give it up to begin with, because you're going to realize consumption versus savings, I don't need to consume that. Right? Like, start thinking about clothes that you buy. Give up buying XYZ clothes. You're going to start using this discipline in things like, what cars do you drive? You're going to realize, I don't need XYZ expense for my car. Who gives a shit? Right? You're going to start realizing, why would I go out to these dinners when I can go to these dinners and it's the same type of food? Why eat this type of food versus this type of food? You're going to start seeing those things. Okay? But that's why this is. Now, like I said, you may not end up saving all that money down the road. Those are just some examples. Okay? But at the end of the day, that's what giving stuff up does. And that's the method that I use. 40 days, give it up, whatever it is. And chances are, when you're done with those 40 days, either A, you're going to say, I don't need this at all anymore. Or B, you're going to say, okay, I can use this, but it's going to be at a much, 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 much reduced level than what you previously did. Okay? So that is the episode for today. Okay. Like I said, you can do it with everything. And I already know when I do workshops, some of you guys ask, like, you give up caffeine and you said that you replenish like that energy. How did you do it? Sleep, right? For 40 days, what did I do? I said I'm going to bed by 10 and I'm waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning. Guess what? I got a full lot of energy. And I tested that. I tested sleeping less than 4 hours. I tested, sleeping 8 hours. My sweet spot was 4 to 6 hours. So I said, I'm going to sleep here. I'm waking up here every day, period. Guess what? I don't need caffeine anymore, right? But that's just an example of a healthy thing. And like I said, that's the episode for today. 40 days, give something up, and you're going to start realizing not only are you saving money, but you're probably healthier, you're probably living a better life, you're spending that time doing something better, which in the next podcast on mindset, I'll be talking about that. You got a lot of time now on your hands. Do something better with it. That's the episode. See you guys next time.